Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds for sharing and learning from one another. It's a vibe. We do Rosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educators spitting bars. I guess you didn't know I'm multifaceted and humble, taking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Making strides, monumental. And rock with me and get down to this new jam. With my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out.
Welcome to the Reads of Rosa podcast. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. She's joining us from Melbourne, Australia. She's the player development manager for the Melbourne Rebels. Welcome to the show, Moana. How are you?
I am really good, thank you. How are you?
I am great, thanks. I'm good, thank you. So good to have you here. It's a Sunday afternoon. How has your day been so far?
It's been pretty low key, to be honest. So we're, as most people are aware, in lockdown 6. I did have already had a video call with my brother back in Auckland to see how they're doing in lockdown. But yeah, pretty cruisy to say the least.
Oh, well, I guess before we head anywhere for this podcast, I just want you to please introduce yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are, where you're from, cultural roots. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. I guess first and foremost, before we officially start, I guess o te whātalofa atu le pa ia malu le awhia. Lau sunga le tai Rosa, a mai se foi le pa ia lasi lo whaafunga mai le nei podcast. O te whātalofa atu ma le nganga whaaloalo. Whawhitai foi o tātou whenua I manu ia le alofa le atua. Whawhitai foi ua maolo awanoa o te whaasau atu le nei asa sapati. Malo lau le soifu ma langi ma. Ia lo ingo o wha Moana Leilua. O lo tama e sau marinu o fusi sa futu la whai. A lo tina o le whale wau. My name, all of that to say is that my name is Moana Leilua, named after my great grandmother. But more known as Moana. My parents are migrants. They migrated to Aotearoa, New Zealand in the 70s. I was born in Tamaki Makaurau, raised in Kirikiriroa in Hamilton, but have spent a significant portion of my life back in Tamaki Makaurau due to university and really just embarking on my career, which is very non-linear to say the least. I am one of 4. I have 3 other siblings. Number 2, have an older sister who is a great single mum in Hamilton with my mum. My younger sister, who's actually here in Melbourne, suffering in lockdown with me, but a couple of suburbs away with her husband, and then my younger brother and his beautiful wife who are based in Clendon Park in Auckland. So we're very small for a Samoan family. My roots are very much entrenched in Anganu'uwha Samoa. Like most parents, the churches that they attended ended up becoming their little village away from the motherland. So our family church was E Whaka Sahimilitone, and that's where our roots are laid. And my late father is now, resting and lying in state back in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in Newstead. So our roots will always be in Waikato. And so that's kind of a little bit of a brief insight into who I am. And yeah, and I find myself here in Melbourne. I've actually just recently moved here at the end of 2019. Was totally oblivious to the fact that we will be going through a pandemic in 2020. Spent most of my time in 2020 becoming familiar with the 4 walls of my bedroom. I essentially worked online. Despite the season or the rugby season still continuing interstate, I ended up actually staying back in Melbourne because the area I was in was a hotspot. And then heading into 2021, thinking that we were a little bit clear of it, but then life happened. 2 lockdowns interstate with the boys traveling. So lockdown 5 and 6 have actually been home. And it's actually been nice to be home. But our season is drawing near, and so just getting ready for pre-season, coming up with what is now Super Rugby Pacifica, which I'm very, very excited about.
Moses, that is a lot that's happened in 2 years. I wanted to go back to the talking about the lockdown because I noticed yesterday I saw on Twitter everyone's talking about Pika. Shout out to the Pacific Island Creative Arts Australia crew who were in charge of was it a drive-in vaccination center for Pacifica communities yesterday? You were part of that, Moana?
Yeah, it was just volunteering.
Mm,
There was an actual vaccination hub in a suburb called Broadmeadows, but it was really great for us to be a little bit more targeted with our Pacifica community. So we've had our own booking system, had our own line for check-in, then also had our own nurses who were able to facilitate the vaccine. So it was really smooth. I think we had just under 60 of our people come through yesterday afternoon, and these vaccination drives have been going on now for a couple of weeks, and that has been driven by Rita Silmanutafa. She's doing some great work within the community here in Melbourne as the Victoria Pacific Health Advisor. And there's a number of vaccination drives coming up. I think there's one actually Efakasa Dandenong coming up next week, and then a few more kind of dotted around because Melbourne, although it's a city, it's actually got the same number of people as the whole of Aotearoa, so it's it's very populated. Yeah, if you know what I mean. So I crack up when I hear 13 cases here, and I say, no, I'll take your 13. We've got like 503 or 573. But it's been amazing to see some of our community leaders band together. We had some church leaders actually come through yesterday afternoon, which was really encouraging because in our community we follow their lead in most cases. So to see some of our elders really take that step, which has been it's been mixed in our community, to be fair. But that was really, really encouraging. And even just to have a beautiful 83-year-old man come through yesterday afternoon, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. It's great to hear the communities getting together to do that. Just to any of our audience, anyone listening who is in Melbourne, make sure you get out there, support. Get out there and support what's going on with the vaccine centres. So I wanted to go back to rugby. Obviously you're in this development role now, but where did it all start for you? Because I know that you used to play rugby. I mean, how long were you playing rugby? How did you go from playing rugby to where you are now? Like, there must have been a lot in terms of your journey in between. Like, could you tell us a little bit about that? Where
Yeah,
did it all
sure.
begin for you?
Yeah, well, it actually began in Avondale, of all places, in West Auckland. So I was a netball player growing up, and I got into Auckland University. So I ended up moving in with my great aunt and my cousins in Avondale. They were actually attending a muster, and I was just the little cousin just tagging along, and at Suburbs. And so Suburbs is where I kind of started my my rugby journey. And loved it. Like, it was totally different from netball, something that I really enjoyed, and ended up playing for just under 15 seasons. Had a couple of years off and on between that 15 seasons, but it was really a vice. I've always had sports, so I played netball since I was 5, so it was either sport, education, church. That was pretty much my life up until I left Kirikiriroa to move to Tamaki for uni. And then rugby became my vice, and I've made some lifelong friends through the game. To be honest, Rosa, this was not a planned career step for me. It really was making the most of opportunities that came my way. So while I was playing rugby, after I had graduated, I was working. And so had played for a number of different clubs, started out west and ended up in south. So the final club that I played for was Ardmore Marist, but I did apply my rugby trade a lot for a number of years at Auckland Marist before making the move south when my brother and I bought a place out in Clendon. So really love the environment. I mean, you've got brothers that have played, and so it is a real family away from home. Made some lifelong friends, as I mentioned before. But rugby was always in the fabric of my childhood. It was rugby and boxing. So those were the
Wow.
sports that our families watched. So I remember vividly that 1991 match between Mama Samoa and Wales. My father and I and our family dog were up watching it. So there's a lot of really great memories with the game. And so to be here actually working in the game is like, it blows my mind, to be honest. So when I had decided to hang up the boots, I also decided to take up some postgraduate studies. But in the same token, I felt like my time wasn't finished with the game. So I volunteered with the club that I had last played at, which was Ardmore Marist. So I helped out the women's team there for a season, and then co-managed the women's team, so Counties Monaco Heat, whilst I was studying. So I was commuting from Tamaki down to Tauranga and to Kirikiriroa for classes. And so it was actually in the first 6 months of doing my postgraduate studies that I was asked if I was free in the summer to actually help out with the men's sevens team. And I was a little bit taken aback, because I've never managed a men's team before. Funnily enough, like, my brother reminded me that my dad used to manage a rugby team back in, say, City Norton Rugby Club in Hamilton. Totally forgot that, not realizing that, hello, it could have been. It's something that my dad did, and I didn't realize that it would be something that I actually would be in. So I volunteered for 2 summers with the men's sevens team, and that's where I really got my teeth sunk into the whole managing in rugby. Because there's a whole bunch of things outside of just managing the day-to-day of the boys, or in this case it was tournaments. And it just so happened after the second season we had a really successful 7 season, and all of that was still voluntary. An opportunity came with the Counties Monaco Rugby Union team. So their what they call flagship team is the Counties Monaco Steelers. Tana Umanga had actually moved on to the Auckland Blues, and there was a vacancy there. The coach that I was working with the men's sevens team secured the role. And then myself and the assistant coach for the sevens team both followed Daryl Suasua. So myself and Lemaru Semostiti, so well-known Manu Samoa sevens player, we both moved with Daryl and served at the Steelers for 4 seasons. So that's where, it's what you see on TV is a little bit different from what happens behind the scenes. So it really was a high octane environment.
Yeah, I was going to ask, right? Because, sorry, just to jump in there, because was it 2016 that you got that role with the Steelers? And what were you seeing behind the scenes? Because just like you said, on TV, everything looks dandy, but behind the scenes, I mean, what were you seeing in terms of, I guess I'm curious about Pacifica, like Pacifica representation in the ranks, I guess, and coaching. What are you seeing behind the scenes in some of these clubs that you're working with, these teams? Like, is it, I don't know. What is it like? What is it really like behind the scenes? Because I imagine it's hard work, and I imagine with our Pacifica players, a lot of social emotional, that plays a huge part in them as these successful rugby players. But yeah, what were you seeing in terms of your role?
It was really interesting. So as the manager, you essentially look after all the logistics and the operations of the team. Also just making sure that that all the guys need to do is just turn up and play. So my service was to ensure that they didn't have anything to worry about, whether it be managing the schedule with the strength and conditioning coach, ensuring that I execute the vision of the head coach in terms of the team environment, what that looks like, and then also making sure that the flights are booked, the hotels are all booked. I've got all of the the meals all sorted with our nutritionist, all that kind of stuff, ensuring that the kit, and that was probably the thorn on my side, is organising the kit, the apparel that the team wears, because in most cases those are not either not in country or not even in your region. And so working alongside some of the commercial staff to tick off on the designs and getting the head coach tick off, that kind of stuff. And then, you know, not only do I have the actual team, that I've got all these stakeholders that I need to make sure that I keep on I guess keep happy. The interesting thing with my role is that the club had been formed, it was established in 1955, which is great. And in Counties Monaco, very staunch rugby supporters. But I was the first female and Pacific team manager that the team had. So I was also really mindful of the, I guess, the quote unquote pressure to perform, because who was this to make Taki Samoa managing a men's rugby team? I was fortunate that I wasn't the only female. So at that particular time that I came into it's now Bunnings NPC, was Mitre 10 Cup back then, there was another female at Taranaki Bulls. And then I had a brother, his name is Mila Poto, he's currently still serving at the Wellington Lions. So it was really great to be able to lean on Nikita, who was now the player, or what New Zealand called the personal development manager for the Black Fern Sevens, and Mila to lean on. And then I had some really great friends in the Northland, North Harbour, Waikato, and Auckland team managers who were really, really helpful as a rookie to make sure that I was across it, especially North Harbour. So Peter White, and shout out to Peter White. I've got a lot of time for that beautiful koinga, who has been serving in the rugby space for a while. So, but yeah, I think if anything, like most things, the balance off field is not the same as on field. We could be doing better. And I was really acutely aware that myself, Seymour, Daryl, all Samoans, were in the part of the management team, that there was real pride in that, and in the makeup of our coaching and management team, because we did look like the players that we were serving. And so we really, I know that Daryl really drove the team culture to ensure that we celebrated our Māori culture, celebrated our own cultures, like most teams in Aotearoa do anyway, with songs. And we went out to a marae for our pre-season. We were able to stay on the marae. And for some of our players, we had one particular season, we had a fellow Australian come through and spend a season with us. Never slept in a marae before, let alone on a whamalu on the ground. Like it's just little things like that, which is a real culture shock. But that was just part of embracing, I guess, the tikanga, and what we were trying to ensure that we instilled in our players to be really proud of who they were. We celebrated, and one thing that I was really proud of was to, video our guys celebrating the language weeks and the seasons that I was serving there at the Steelers. And so those kind of came up as memories this year. But I really wanted to ensure that if I was to be in the role, that my role was to ensure that our young men didn't have to worry about things. And that really carried through. And it wasn't easy, to be honest. Like, the unconscious biases and the institutional racism, that stuff still exists. And it was just navigating that. And the instances that I had to encounter, those things, all I could think of was my parents, and how they would have gone through their own battles coming from Samoa to Aotearoa with limited English. I'm educated though, so I'm in a little bit more of a privileged position. But how would I react? How do I be exercise whaalualo, even though I was just cringing inside? So it was that was a real battle for me. But I feel as if I was able to leave Counties Monaco in a place where I'd done all that I could do. I did not envisage that I would ever leave Aotearoa, to be honest. It was while I was actually off contract. I did a short contract in New Zealand Rugby, took the Black Ferns Development 15 to Fiji at the end of 2019. And it was there that I stumbled across the advertisement for this particular role. And I had been contracting at that point for a couple of years. And I knew, without the shadow of a doubt, if I was going to go back into a permanent role, it had to meet certain expectations. And it wasn't until I had secured the role that my brother reminded me, because I'm all for vision boards and stuff like that. So he found the vision board when I was packing. He goes, "Mo, look at this." And in everything that was on there that I wanted in the job, and I was really specific: salary, the type of role. And I was, at that particular time, it was a season in my life, I was open to moving out of Tamaki. So I was looking at Wellington. I was actually looking at Perth. and then Melbourne, because I have my sister here in it, Melbourne Rebels and the Rugby Union Players Association, who I work for, but I'm based at the Rebels, ticked all those boxes. So from the time that I had interviewed to the time that I arrived, it was 2 weeks. It was real, just like that. I made the choice, packed up my stuff and came. And I'm single, so I was in a season that I could just pack up and leave. I unfortunately had to leave my dogs back in Aotearoa with my brother, obviously sorting out our affairs with our mokesi. But yeah, I find myself here in the Australian rugby ecosystem and love it. Like it's different being here as a staunch as Aotearoa All Black supporter. My friends are saying that my allegiances haven't changed fully. Like it just so happens that I'm supporting the Wallabies because I've got fellow Rebels players that are in the Wallabies. So last night's win was epic. So it wasn't a fluke. And then, you got our Kiairani brother and Dave Rennie at the helm. So I have to support the Wallabies while there are Rebels in the Wallabies. So, yeah.
Man, I'm such a bandwagon when it comes to rugby. Like, I'm really not. I hardly watch rugby. When there was the Japan the Sunwolves, and would get
Yes.
tickets and would always go. I'm so bandwagon. I'll be in the crowd like cheering as if I even know what's going on. Have no understanding of the game, but I loved when the New Zealand teams came over. And then I'll just be so bandwagon going along with everyone. But I'm just like, yeah, going hardcore. So no judgments on you supporting the Wallabies. I have nothing to say about that. Man, what's really cool is hearing that you were able to kind of say, this is what I want in a job, and everything was ticked off. Like, I don't think that many people can say that, this is what I want in a job, everything's been ticked off my list, and I got it. Like, that's pretty cool, sis. Like, I don't know many people that can say that.
Yeah, I think the real watershed moment for me was losing my dad. So we lost our dad in 2011, so it'll be 10 years this year, in November, to cancer. And he was only 62 at the time, so I was in my early 30s. The things that I always think about, being the status that I am. I won't have my dad to be able to walk me down the aisle, to have the father-daughter dance. And what really hit home was that that time really is finite. And I really needed to be intentional and deliberate with my purpose. Like, it really, I had to reflect back on what I was doing, and was I pouring and investing my energies into the things that mattered. And so I think it was really important for me then on. So pursuing my my master's was something that I always wanted to do. And then remember, time is finite. So I just applied, did it part-time while I was working full-time, which was the hardest. So I take my hat off to anyone that is studying while working, because I know what it feels like. It's not easy. I'm so thankful that I had my brother to kind of support me, my mum to make me cups of coffees to get me through the night. But I really wanted to make sure that I'm going to live the rest of my life making sure that I was purposeful, that the things that I put my hand to, that they're aligned with my purpose and my values, because I was hoping to have my dad till he was 80. He died at 62. So things like putting things, like speaking things into existence, even just doing vision boards and plans. And I'm really all about that kind of stuff, but even more so once I lost dad. So I look back in the last 10 years since he's passed, been able to do some great things and some milestones that he's unfortunately missed out on. But the day that I got my master's project and my final mark, I was at the headstone. I went to visit him and was talking to him and shared with him my result before I shared it with my mum and my siblings. Those little things I always make sure and check that, that I've still got my dad with me. And I think we're going to be talking about it later, but I went through my journey of getting my malu done. The picture of my dad was with me and my brother during our journey. We had songs playing that were really songs that my dad loved. So since then we've been really deliberate about making sure that we involve him, even though he's not here in the flesh. in everything that we do. So even just as soon as you enter my house, there's a picture of me, my dad, and my brother. That was a gift from my brother-in-law. So everything that I do, and I know that this is common amongst most Samoans and Pacifica peoples, is that we truly do stand on the shoulders of giants. And so who am I not to make the most of the opportunities I'm given? Who am I to not make sure that the way that I serve, the way that I act, especially in the workplace, is not honoring, but also mindful that I'm also a woman of faith. So I truly believe that God will honor the things that you, when you're obedient and faithful. No, I'm not saying that perfectionism is a mirage. So the only perfect thing is Jesus Christ, but making sure that everything that I do is in the light, and then is something that I carry my name. I carry Leilua. I carry Nu'ualitia wherever I go. So very, very cognizant of the fact that it's not just about me; it's about my village behind me. So yeah. I'm rambling. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Honestly, sis, this might just be the podcast where I cry. Honestly, there have been some podcasts when I'm just like, oh, I'm about to cry, but I'm just like, no, don't be that guy that cries. But now I'm just like, oh, inspirational,
Yeah.
sis. You mentioned your malu, the journey that you took with your brother. The marks of our ancestors. Man, it's special. It's so special when you can do that with your brother. Um, I don't know. Can you speak a little bit about the journey? I mean, I know you've already mentioned just the importance of dad and, how he played a part in it, even though he was there in spirit. Um, yeah, tell us a little bit about that with your brother.
Yeah, it actually took a bit of time. So it was in 2010. So my brother and I had been living together for a while anyway, and we've been discussing it. Something, because at that stage I don't have any other tattoos. That's the only tattoo that I've got at the moment. So in 2010 we went home, had kongai. We were just talking with our parents and asked for their blessing, because we really wanted to make sure that we did it. We personally wanted to have our parents' involvement in it, and they gave us their blessing. Unfortunately, not too long after that, Dad was diagnosed with cancer. He died a year later, but we actually didn't go through our particular Malufia journey until 2016. So it was a really key year for me. I just finished my first season with the Steelers, and so I was trying to manage the function and everything that we had to do for the boys, but also trying to manage my time to make sure that it was interesting. So we're part of an exhibition, and I had to manage when I was going to be in the session based on whether we were going to make finals. So strange. And so I was working at that particular time. We had Bena, who was kind of the liaison between us and the Tufunga. And I said, Bena, we've just made the semi-finals, so I can't do it this particular time. I'd have to go towards the end. And so it really was important for us to keep in alignment with the Tufunga that had got my dad. So Dad was done by the late Paulu Suape back in 1986. And it was just uncanny that 30 years later that my brother and I were able to kari the ao together with our fellow brothers and sisters who were part of that particular exhibition at MIT Otara. So it really was, we kind of didn't click that it was 30 years almost to the day until my mum had told me. And I think the beautiful thing about it was, because we had prayed about it and really soaked it in prayer, my particular journey was, my friends were saying that if you were looking at doing it, you should have come into Mo's session because you didn't flinch. Like I felt spiritually prepared for it. I was talking with the koinga, I was talking with the koso. We had some really good conversations about rugby, because obviously that's a really good icebreaker with a lot of guys. And then finding out that the koso was related to one of my best mates. I had my friends there and their kids, kapiling me while I was going through my sessions. But what for me that blew me away was realizing that my mum was did exactly what she did with my dad, with my little brother, making sure that he was okay, ensuring, it was almost like she had almost like a rebirth for my
Mm,
mum, because what she was doing, my brother is now, he's turning 40 this year.
mm,
So he was just mid-30s at the time. To think that she was bathing her only son again, almost 30 or 35 years later. It was a really special bonding moment for my brother and my mum. And for me, that was super special, because she was telling stories of when she did the same thing for my dad. And
mm,
we were always talking about how, I remember when my dad's journey had happened, so up had come to Hamilton. He had, we essentially put all the chairs and the tables outside. He did everything in our dining room. And from my dad inviting him, 5 other men from within Hamilton went through their journey as well. So it was just really awesome to be able to reflect back on that. And I remember Mafkanga Ki Ngā coming over and helping out. And obviously, as you're aware, when you do go through that journey, e paulo kofi. And
mm,
so we ended up at the Methodist Church for a couple of months, because his titles and his positions at church were dropped due to him going through that journey. So I know now I've got some really great friends at the Methodist Church who are my day ones, and just everything that it kind of happened back then in the 80s. Seeing one of my best friends, Erolini, whose dad also went through the journey with my dad. So it's just a real like a real weaving of what happened in Kirikiriroa in Tamaki, and then just seeing a lot of our journeys kind of come to the fore. Beautiful. Spiritually, it was amazing. I really do. It's a beautiful adornment. It's a beautiful treasure, beautiful miasina that we have the privilege of both wearing, Mauso. So
mm.
um, it's I remember, as you do when you the first shower, the first time you get changed, it's like, oh my gosh, there's this
Yeah,
black ink on. It's
you
like,
know, that
what about that?
happened to me, like, last week. Like, I just like, it's just, it's just forever that proud moment you look back on. But yeah, like last week, I happened to look down, like waking up in the morning, going, "What? Oh yeah, that's right." Like
Yeah.
it's always a surprise, but and then it's just like that feeling of just such pride and you know,
Yeah, and especially I mean, you're in Japan now, and you are able to. Our culture is now, like we were talking about diaspora. You're now in a country that is not our own, but when you carry something absolutely beautiful with you on the daily, and I think that's a real encouragement for us who are no longer with our in the familiar place in Aotearoa or the motherland in Samoa, that we can still continue to be able to carry ourselves with dignity, carry ourselves with mana, and everything that we do. And it's not by chance that you're doing this particular podcast, but also as an educator, also the hearts and minds that you're shaping. And I really do believe that this beautiful black ink that is on our bodies is a nod to our ancestors. And and I know that it's a little bit cliche, but they say that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Who would have thought that one of their own would be in Japan? Oh my goodness. They're only just thinking of the shores of Aotearoa in Australia, and now you are just doing the damage in Japan, sis. So know that I know that our ancestors are absolutely just cheering us on, because we're walking in our power. We are taking our family with me. And as much as it pains us that we're away from our loved ones, we carry them, because we need to remember that the values that were instilled in us, that will always go and be with us. So know that you're not alone also, and the fact that we are both sisters, sisters now wearing, adorning a beautiful miasina of our motherland, forever, man. Got you.
oh man, for real, right here. Man, you know, it's onto the diaspora. Um, there's always this, like, on social media. There's always this, like, ongoing debate about who can and who can't. You know, where who can get a better, who shouldn't get one, who can get a malu, who shouldn't get one. What are your thoughts on that, man? It's always overwhelming, the debates that go on. I stay right out of it.
Yeah.
but it can get super intense.
Yeah, and it really can, and I can see, I guess the positives from both sides, but then also understanding that when I was the tufunga also carries a major responsibility because in essence they are the one that are choosing to be able to mark the people that come across their mat. So yeah, like you, I've got some really dear friends who are very strong stances on it. But everyone's journey is different, and I can't speak on behalf of that because I know that maybe what I feel about it is totally different from others. But I'm also very mindful that if you do choose to adorn the marks of our ancestors, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And if you don't feel as if you are in a season in your life that you're able to carry that responsibility, to carry to the duty that comes with it, then I would say maybe step aside. But in most cases, from the stories that I've heard, even from non-Samoans that have gone, especially some sisters who have gone and their experiences and their journey has been really personal. And I can't judge someone's personal journey, so it's definitely not my place. But I know that those discussions have been going on even since Su'ape, because I was aware he was, to hear of stories of him going to Europe and, when there was a power cut and the only thing that was you could hear was the tapping of our instruments, that kind of stuff. And I think he really broke the mold of being able to really, I guess, give some bandwidth to culturally to some of our traditions. And then as a result, we do have some of our people like yourself and like others who are in the Northern Hemisphere that adorn the mea sina, but have been able to do some really grand things in their respective industries. So yeah, that's a hard one to answer, to be honest. Yeah.
In 2019, I remember seeing the Brumbies in the Super Rugby, and I remember seeing the Brumbies wearing wearing was it FA Kanga. They were I guess as a travel uniform arriving into a stadium. Man, that was so cool. Like I remember reading about it here at that time and thinking, what? This is awesome. And it's an Australian team. I don't know why I just kind of expect that kind of stuff with teams in Aotearoa, but it was an Australian team and I was just like so blown away by that. Yeah, do you in terms of your role, because honestly I don't know much about Melbourne Rebels. I mean, I know they're a rugby team. Do you that kind of stuff where you're able to like showcase you know, culture and of players. Does a lot of that happen in your team? Like, is that something that um, the players association are those some things that they kind of look into and how they can embrace different cultures? Not just obviously Pacifica, but indigenous, Australian culture. Like, do you see that more, and are you seeing that more in terms of rugby in Australia as a whole, the Super Rugby teams, or is it still something that was that a one-off? I mean, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, well, I really don't have anything to compare it to because I've only been here for about 18 months or so.
mm,
But in the short 18 months, I'm really sensing such an amazing shift, like a paradigm shift happening within the rugby ecosystem here. And so the things that happen at the Brumbies, so I think the most, if you're looking at the 5 super teams that are here, the ACT Brumbies, the Melbourne Rebels, and the Queensland Reds are probably the ones with the most Pacifica players. So for the Rebels, just under 50, I think 50% this year will be of Pacifica heritage. The Reds are probably the same, and the Brumbies. And so the Brumbies have a really strong Pacifica community. And I spent a bit of time there because we had to escape lockdown 3 and we hopped in our cars and we drove to Canberra. So we spent about a month there. So I was able to engage with some people from the rugby community there that are Māori, and also one of our Samoan brothers. And they're doing some great things together with the club. So the Ia Whaikanga They even just last year they showcased a Pacifica jersey, which was a player input into the design of the jersey. Things that I've done with the Rebels, because one of the pillars for my role in terms of our player development program is cultural awareness around Pacifica. So, and the hiring of myself was critical for the team. Not to, I say it humbly, just in the sense that I was able to, came from a rugby background. I had my MBA. I played the sport both at regional and international level. But the fact that I had also worked, I spent about 9 years working in Counties Monaco for MIT Otara, working with our young people. So all of that kind of ticked the boxes here for the Rebels, because the Rebels community, rugby community here, over 60% of the players that play club rugby are brown. And so it's exciting to be part of, I guess, the kind of the changing wave that's happening here. Very much in Sydney, so we were there in lockdown 4. We had a cultural session. I really wanted to make sure that it was player driven. It's come up a couple of our Samoan players were able to know the paki ball. Very, very, very simple stuff, and stuff that is common back at home, but not common here. Had one of our Fijian brothers who plays for the Fijian international team. He taught him. And so all that kind of stuff is actually happening, and something that I am driving within the Rebels Club. And then I am aware that different things happen within the Pacifica rugby community interstate. So, and you may have seen, even just in the Wallabies culture, they've been very inclusive. Like I've been loved hearing even Māori, Waiata, heard Matongan and Samoan, him being some Fijian one. And I know that they've been doing some First Nations activities with some of the players. And then even just a nod to the First Nations people now, with the back of the jersey numbers for the Wallabies teams has a Indigenous design. All of that is new. Last year they had their national anthem sung in the Yora language, which is where the tribe where they actually played the game, that was their mother tongue. So it was the first time they've ever sung the Australian national anthem in a language outside of English. So common for us, but not here in Australia. So I really am sensing some real positive changes, and it's just really exciting to actually be a part of it.
And I know you haven't been there that long, but do you know of other women who are in similar roles like yours, perhaps with other clubs, other Super Rugby clubs? Are there a lot of women at that level of the game? Like, I don't know, like.
Yeah, not yet,
Yeah.
not yet. And I say yet. Really, I'm really confident that in the not too distant future that we will have a lot more Pacifica. And this includes our Melanesian brothers and sisters as well, represented in the game. NRL have, I lean to NRL for some support. There's a beautiful Māori PDM at the Gold Coast Titans that I'm in contact with. There's some of the brothers that work for NRL themselves that I'm in constant contact with. So I've actually had to reach outside of my code for some support from like-minded brothers and sisters. But I am aware that some of the like similar to like a rugby, the rugby club rugby union, so like Auckland Rugby, Waikato, we have Rugby Victoria. We've got maybe 3 staff of colour that are there. It's a Melanesian and a couple of Pacific Islanders. And I am aware that ACT also has a couple of Samoans. So they are dotted around the place, but there's still definitely a little bit of an imbalance. I am not sure whether there is anyone of Māori or Pacifica heritage who are currently sitting on boards, like in governance roles across the rugby sector. My hope is that they might prove you wrong. There might be someone there. But what I do know of, maybe a couple of clubs that I'm aware of, there's myself. Our analyst happens to be of Fiji and Australian descent, which is great. And then we also have a Samoan and one of our elite pathways manager. So there are kind of 3 of us. But in terms of my area, at the moment, it is just me in the Super Rugby level.
That's crazy. when you were playing rugby, were you able? I know you played for Manusina, right?
Yeah.
Manusina, but did you have an opportunity to play for the New Zealand team? Is it the Black Ferns
Black
or?
Ferns. So in women's rugby at the moment, it was like one country for life essentially. So when you choose one, you can't really change. I know in the men's game, you can sit out a couple of World Cups and then swap over. So no, I was fortunate to actually apply my trade alongside some amazing Black Ferns. So in that golden era, in the 90s, when I was in late 90s, early 2000s, was playing alongside, because most of them were either Auckland Maris or College Rifles, some amazing players. So I think I definitely know that I've played with the best and learnt from the best. Even played alongside Fiorfa Malsili, who was a former captain of the Black Ferns. Some of my really good friends and the Levere sisters, who are staunch Black Ferns players. I think Vanya Wolfgram, near Levere, she's currently working for New Zealand Rugby, doing some really great things in the women's game there as the game development manager. So a lot of us have rugby was a kind of a way for us to breathe and relieve stress, but to find myself, they say that when you allow your passion to become your purpose, it will become your profession. And that particular statement is so true of me. I never would have thought that I'd be working in the men's game. I really do have a sincere love for the game and the men that I serve, because in most cases they're going to be the future leaders of their homes. One thing that we're big with RUPA, the Rugby Union Player Association, is a better person, better player, better life. Like, it really is around the holistic view of the athlete, and that's kind of what I really centre my work on. I'll let the high performance staff look after the on-field stuff, but for me, it's really important to make sure that our young men are well rounded, that they've got access to resources, whether it be education and training, financial management, even just cultural intelligence, all that kind of stuff, so that when they decide to transition away from the game, they're still good humans, if you know what I mean. They're not identified by the ball that they happen to play with. That didn't come across right, but yeah. Just read that one. But I mean, like, their identity is not wrapped up in rugby. That is probably a better way of putting it. But yeah, reminding them that they're more than just a rugby player. And so I find that that's kind of my role, is to bring it home, that it is about them and figuring out who they are. Because some of our young men, that has been their driving force, is to always get a professional contract. And so now that they've got it, it's maintaining it, because it really is. It's not it's not as like dog eat dog like the NFL, but you need to make sure that you're on point all the time. And then when injuries happen, I'm really mindful of young men and women's mental health, especially in this climate that we're living in. So being really exercising discernment when I work with some of these young men, and they're amazing young men. And I have to keep off the socials sometimes during games, when some of those couch coaches go a little bit too hard out for talking about players on their Twitter feeds or Facebook posts. And that was something that I learned at the Steelers. I needed to learn not to make sure that I distanced myself for a couple of months, especially when I was at the Steelers, from social media. As if I read the things that some people were saying in the comforts of keyboard warriors, it would have really, really pissed me off. But I was really mindful that, at the end of the day, they don't see the blood, sweat and tears. So these young men, they are, like you were saying about behind the scenes, it was a real eye-opener seeing what they do to really master their craft outside of the camera. All people see is 80 minutes of a game. They don't see all of the hard yards that they do. So I have a real massive respect for athletes, and obviously for everyone that I have the blessing to be able to serve. And so I really do make sure I do take my job seriously. I really want to make sure that if I'm not on point, then how can I be able to make sure that they're on point? So I also need to make sure that my mental health is also in check. And I have no qualms in sharing that, I have had conversations with counsellors, because I need to practice what I preach. If I'm asking these guys to go and see sports psychs, if they're going through real significant dark places in their kind of rugby journey, then who am I? So it's been a real journey that I'm kind of taking along with the guys, and it's not something that is common in our culture to be able to reach out. But I really want to normalize seeking professional help. Yes, you can have your circle, but it's really important that, there are some of these people that are a little bit more qualified than my best friend, a little bit more qualified than mum and dad to be able to navigate through some of all the stuff that's happening in my head. And it actually really did help me get through lockdown 5 because I was supposed to be home. So I've tried to go to Aotearoa twice, and both times there have been lockdowns. So the second one, it really got to me because I missed out on the birth of my grandnephew, missed out on Father's Day and having my birthday with my mum. And so, things happen, and I wasn't in the healthiest frame of mind. And then I was reminded, okay, you need to practice what you preach. So reached out to a counselor, and she just, when you speak to someone that is neutral, that has no idea about your background or anything about you, they can just put the pieces back together. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. So it's just those kind of moments that I'm finding that I've been able to mix a little bit of what I'm doing with my own values and figuring out what works. And I'm finding that it's actually been really all still, and 10 years on after Dad's death, I feel it's really all part of my healing process and figuring out, life, my new normal without Dad, but also my new normal in this climate that we're living in with the pandemic. Yeah.
I saw on your Twitter bio, I think on your social media bios, you have rookie wordsmith.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, because I was just like, what does she mean here? What are you gonna drop some rhymes or something? A
No,
poem or something?
not at
I mean,
all.
what is it about? What is it about?
So it was actually part of my healing process. I started a blog to cope with losing my dad. And so I've been really sporadic with it. And it just so happened that just before I came to Australia, had a conversation with the then CEO of Pacifica Media Network, PMN. She was really keen on getting me on board to do something to do with sport, being a Pacific professional in the game. And at that particular time, they were really focused on music and arts. And so they didn't have anything sport, knowing that we've got a massive demographic that are participating in sport. And so the whole idea was I was hoping to run a show and that kind of stuff. And then I ended up securing this job here. And so it just so happened I reached out to them and said, all I've done is a 10,000 word project for my master's, but I'm really keen on writing. So I did a couple of articles, opinion columns for PMN last year. And that was really something different, something creative. I've always loved writing, like reading. So writing was, I remember when I was in primary school, I wrote like the Jack and the Beanstalk, like in my own, the Moana way. Because I loved English. English was my favorite subject. But funnily enough, I actually ended up doing my undergrad in biological sciences. So I moved away from the English and history and headed into sciences. But I've always loved writing. So that was the whole rookie wordsmith. I still believe that I've been encouraged by some friends to really look at writing again. I haven't written anything in 21, but I've just started blogging again. So that's my rookie wordsmith. I did actually, one of the things that I had done a number of years ago was enter a short story through Moana Observer. Got a special mention for Australia and New Zealand, and now my little story that I wrote it's actually been made into a book and has been translated into Mandarin actually. So yeah, it was a whole bunch of us that had submitted stories for this competition. We didn't win, but all those that got special mentions for Australia and New Zealand, they put all of those stories into a short book. So it's a crack up. Like I got my friends to read it. They're asking for part 2. I was going, mate, I was trying to make it. Honestly, I was trying to rush it to submit it to Samoa because at that particular stage, one of my best friends, Grace, just lost her dad, and I was on my way to the family service, and I was trying to submit it. And so in the I actually mentioned her name inside. She's one of my characters in my short story. Real young adult,
Yeah.
Yeah, young adult kind of story. Yeah.
First of all, I need to know the name of this book. Number two, I need to know your blog so I can read it. That is, I'm so curious now about this book. This
Yeah,
collection
it's
of
just
stories.
it's a hilarious short story based in Waikato. I just mean, it's just me being me. Yeah, those ones are. But
Oh
that
man.
was really, and that was actually something Lani Went Young put on Twitter. She had tagged me into it, and I thought, if Lani Went Young believes that I can do a short story, then I'm just gonna do it. And so I did it, and then I messaged her to say when I got a special mention. Of course, I think there was about 6 of us all together got special mentions. I said thank you for giving me that little bit of a push to be able to submit something, because I didn't think I had it in me, but I thought if Lani thinks that I can do it, I'm going to do it. So yeah.
That's exciting. Give me that information. Straight after this, you're not getting off until you give me the information once I've turned off this live. Um, man, curious leader is another thing that's also listed on your bio. I would say you are a leader in your
Yeah.
field. Curious leader, what's
Yeah, I would deem myself as a reluctant leader.
okay?
Um, I think my curiosity comes from things that I've read and following people that I follow, where their maybe leadership styles are a little bit different from what I know culturally, and so that's where my curiosity lies. I love following random people. So I've got what's her name? So this is um, Sarah Robb O'Hagan.
Mm.
So she is a Kiwi woman who is currently kicking ass, literally, in North America. She had worked for a number of like Nike and all that kind of stuff, but she's just come out with some really great things. And then I follow people like Justin Su'a, who is he is
Oh
the kind of
yes,
the mental skills coach for the Tampa Bay Rays.
I love his stuff.
Um, and I'm a real Bozema St. John. So I really am. I kind of really am attracted to people who are a little mix of charismatic and then also a little bit standoffish with their leadership. And so yeah, that's where my curiosity lies. Going outside of my, I guess what I am aware of, what I know, to be able to add to my leadership. I think leadership is something that's been instilled into me and my siblings through my parents. My dad served as the whailokusi for the church for a very, very long time. So he has been my role model. My mum, who may not be as vocal as my dad, her leadership style was a little bit more reserved, but the work ethic that I have comes from my mum. I mean, she's still working now, 67 years old, as a healthcare support worker, a healthcare assistant at a retirement home hospital in Hamilton. So if she can do it, then I can do it. So yeah, I get the best of both worlds, seeing someone who's very charismatic and really out there like my dad, but then my mom's really quiet leader. Servant leadership is something that was really common with my mom, but she did it in a real quiet and conscientious way. So been able to take, I'm really fortunate that I have the best of both worlds in terms of role models of my parents. Yeah.
What are some fun memories of growing up in the Ifakasa
Mate,
town?
yeah. Yeah, so our church was built in 1991, and so just leading up to building our church, I remember there was the Soccer World Cup, and so we had all this just stand everywhere. So we made our own little Soccer World Cup. So everyone was designated a team. I think I was in Holland, Brazil. There was So there weren't that many girls in our church, so it was just me and my sister mainly. There's some two older ones, older women, but most of them were all boys. So we always were either doing soccer, real random sports that we were doing just to keep ourselves occupied. But if not, it was we would have would have competitions to see who could find the verse first, and then the whawhiao would split it up, girls and boys. So it really was our village. Our late Reverend Mose Atimalala, he was our spiritual father, and really was different from others because he was a graduate from Knox College, and so he was still working at Hamilton City Council while also serving at the church. And we had really great role models, even in their children. All four are university graduates who are doing really, really well now, especially in Tamaki. And so we were fortunate that we had really great role models, but we also we would have kauvanga, and I know that Te Aratue Whakasa had a sort of kanga with Hamilton.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
That's all. I was just like, yeah, I remember, and I'm sure
yeah,
it was so funny because at the time I was thinking, man, this poor church is thinking, look at them. There's so many of them, because you guys were such a small aoloku,
yeah,
and then there's us heroes coming down with like bringing everyone. But it was so much fun, regardless
yeah,
of the difference in the numbers, obviously. But it was so much fun just to be able to
yeah,
get away. And I remember we also came to the family service, but I think we arrived like maybe late, to farewell your minister.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, we had some really amazing founding fathers in the church that unfortunately now have left, have gone to paradise. So I was really fortunate to have grown up with them. We had a lot of fun. Obviously, we had the kauvanga and the sort of kanga with Te Aratū Whakasa. But the kauvanga, we were like you were saying, we were very small, but we were mighty, the mighty
yes,
Waikato. So
yes,
we would actually do really well in some of those kauvanga against our Okilangi Salty
yeah,
churches. And so we we won a number of the plays. So we'd have Karakusipa Ia and then Bese. So we had a choice piece and a set piece. And we actually did really, really well considering we were so small. But I think because we really lived the whole village life, and Hamilton became really, really close, we were aware. It was just I'm really grateful that my parents had the foresight to be able to move to Kirikiriroa when they did, and just after my brother was born, because I think life would have been very different if we had stayed in Avondale. We were essentially based before we actually made the move down to Hamilton. But I will forever be grateful to my Ifakasa roots. I'm not fellowshipping in a Ifakasa at the moment, but whenever I go home, or that's where my roots are. So being able to help out, even just yesterday with the vaccination hub, and a number of the community came from our Ifakasa community, it was really great to be able to bond through something that was similar, we were familiar. And I know that will never go away. And so we didn't have much family in Hamilton, but our friends became our family. So those links to Hamilton and the Whakasa church there are real strong. My dad essentially served there until the day he died. So we have nothing but love and gratitude towards the church and our village, because they were very, very much part of our lives as well.
I did the podcast with Reverend Brian Corlia, and you had commented on YouTube, just in regards to just a section that we talked about. There was a part we talked about the role of women in the church, which I was super curious about, and I was so happy when I saw you. I saw you like, I mean, honestly, big up, shout out to my brother Brian, because Rev Brian Corlia, because he was super patient. He was, like he was so open to any questions. I really appreciated that. But I too was so curious about, the role of women in the church and how it's evolving. I guess now being on the outside, I mean, it's just it's something I'm always curious about, right? Because I know growing up, there was always I know in youth things would always question, when will women be able to? I don't know if saying a more prominent role is the right word, but do you know what I mean? Like, when are they going to be able to, I guess, lead from the front? I know we all know that, behind a strong man, there's a stronger woman, that kind of thing. But man, some of our whaletua, they've got degrees, there's, they're scholars in their field, and I just it's something I'm always curious about. And I saw you comment on YouTube, and I was like, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's one of my one irks about it, is that I'm very familiar with what you're saying. I do know that there are women out there that would be great as whaiwhiao, to be honest.
And
I want to make
lecturers.
yeah. And correction to what you were saying before, beside every great man is an
Right.
even more great woman. So,
Mm.
and that, I mean, I'm not a feminist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know what we bring to the table as women. I am aware that there are women out there that could preach the house down. They could lead the church. I have an auntie, my auntie Marie. She is very, like, she is the Whaiwhiao. And her husband, prior to her second husband now, who's also Whaiwhiao, I mean, they both lead in churches. And so, and that she was my mum's cousin. So I had a example of someone who was actually doing it. And then I also am aware of other really great whaiwhiao in Auckland that are walking and talking and are leading their churches who are female. So why i whakaasa haven't they have progressed in a small way, but I think to really make the mark is to really make some changes. I don't know whether it's a constitution or whether it's just the institution themselves, but yeah, that's my thing. That I used to have some debates with my rest in peace with Mosiati Malala. So I really wanted to. So I was a kapiango
Yeah.
for the Alfebesi, and I remember one time I just wanted to have a break because I had an exam, and we had a little bit of a verbal debate. And I mean, I got a grounding from my dad, but I said, "Doctor, that's not you should know my studies need to come first." but those are the things, and I'm really grateful that my dad, at the end of the day, he wanted his daughters, because Sally, my youngest, my brother is the youngest of three. He's got three older sisters. So we really needed to, before Sully was of age, we did everything that someone's son would do. And so I was always really, I remember this one time I got bullied at primary school. I went and told my dad, and he goes, "What am I going to do about it?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." I need to be more bold. I need to be more courageous then. And so I was really always mindful that I needed to make sure that I did everything possible before I went to my parents. And so I don't think they didn't envisage that their daughter was going to be having a little bit of a debate with the whaiwhiao was going to be one of those things. But I was really thankful that my parents raised me well enough to know that if there's an injustice, to actually speak out. And in most cases there was a time I remember it was a Christmas day, and my dad had spent the whole entire day at church, and we had come down from Auckland to spend time, and had to have I had a really hard conversation with him around family, because that's what we know of. All we know is we had to give. And I said, all we wanted was to have you for Christmas, and you spent it at the church, which is not a bad thing. But for where we were at as a family, it was something that was really, really important to us. So I told my brother, get in the car, we're going back up to Auckland. And so we did, yeah. So I find that I'm usually the one that has to speak to my parents before, And so that was one conversation, really hard conversation that I had to have, but it was a really good one, because I think for me and my parents, it really made us closer. And you know how you always have the New Year's services and you always get up early hours. My mum was telling me my dad's one for that lukua wha'i that they had was around family, and he had a bit of a moment when he was on the pula'a, and then my mum rang me to let me know, and so we went down and did the whole hug. But it was those kind of conversations, I think I'm so thankful that I was able to have, because I didn't realize that I wouldn't have my dad for that long. But the relationship between a child and their parents is so, like, to me, it's so important. I don't understand it when I hear of some of my non-Pasifika friends, or even some, who have no relationship with their parents. That breaks my heart. I'm glad that there was a time where there was almost like a fear element, as we need to whaalualo, but then it came a time where you were bold enough to be able to, share your mangaku, so that you can have really adult conversations with your parents. And I loved seeing that progression with my relationship with my parents. And even now my relationship with mum, seeing that, she's all we've got. So We have our Zoom kalamoanga, which is really great. She loves to get all of our ideas together and then make a decision. So it's really, I love seeing how things have evolved over the years. It's been a real beautiful process. Yeah.
World Rugby. Sorry, I forgot to ask this earlier on. We were talking about rugby. World Rugby and the Pacific Island nations, Pacific Island countries, um, and the whole, like every time around Rugby World Cup year, there's always this ongoing debate about, what's happening with the Pacifica nations. What are they doing for these, the lower
Tier two. Yeah.
tier, tier two countries. Um, are we ever? I mean, from your professional perspective, from someone who's in like rugby, um, are we ever going to see anything happen, like anything for our Pacifica countries, or is it just going to continue to be dominated by tier one?
I believe that there is some positive changes starting to happen. So the mere fact that we've got 2 Pacific Islands teams join the Super Rugby competition is massive for Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. So there is a viable pathway for our rugby players who don't make the teams, who wouldn't have made the teams originally, will now get an opportunity to be paid professionally for what they do in the Southern Hemisphere. So they're close to home. So I understand Fiji's going to be based here in Australia. Moana Pacifica will be based in Tamaki, I think. So the whole idea of those 2 teams informing is that they're able to really put back into the mother unions. So Tonga, Lakapi Samoa, and Fiji rugby unions were heavily involved in ensuring that those 2 teams actually get off the ground. And so it's good to see that they will be joining Super Rugby 2022. It's just making sure that they're going to be sustainable, that they're able to play competitive rugby. You don't want to them have their first game and get kicked by 80 points. You want to make sure that they're really competitive. So that's another pathway that some of the players in Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji could potentially take if they're really wanting to progress in their rugby. And then it also means that they are going to be playing against the best in the Southern Hemisphere. So it will only make their respective mother nations or mother teams stronger. I think, if anything, it's the infrastructure at the mother unions that need a little bit of work. I am aware that World Rugby do invest quite heavily in Samoa and Tonga Rugby Union, and Australia through what they call Pacific Australia Sport, almost like MFAT or DFAT back at home, invest in Australia and also invest in the Pacific Islands and also the Melanesian, so with Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu. So there is a lot happening, and that doesn't get talked about. It just doesn't happen as fast as people would like it. And I think I do agree that there needs to be more rugby games played. Our island teams, like the recent Cook Island team, they only come together once every couple of years. If there is some decent investment, they get a few more games, or only just make the game great for Kuki Airani. It's just, I guess, the investment, having the proper people at the helm, managing the finances that come through, being able to have really decent pathways, both elite and in community. Samoa have got some really great initiatives happening, even in girls rugby, which I'm really encouraged about. All of those little initiatives need to get off the ground in the motherland. And as they build up the team, and I know Mamu Samoa at the moment are traveling in the Northern Hemisphere, they can't take anyone from down here because of our strict lockdowns. So they're going to be selecting from the Northern Hemisphere. And that's actually really good for Mamu Samoa, because they get to be able to, I guess, look at the talent up there leading up to the 2023 World Cup. Then they've actually have seen a broad range of players, not just a handful of players. So my hope is to see some more positive development there. Obviously, now with the change of government in Samoa, there might be some changes there because the former Prime Minister was very heavily involved in Lakapi Samoa. and everything else back in Samoa. So I think that maybe change in some of the governance and the structure of that will definitely help Mamu Samoa and Lakapi Samoa going forward. So I'm still going to remain positive. I think we do need to remain optimistic. I think the addition of those two teams in Super Rugby Pacifica is actually going to be amazing for the nations, because it gives our young men a little bit of hope that they don't need to travel all the way to the Northern Hemisphere. They can play in Australia or play in New Zealand to be able to get some quality rugby and get paid to play. But I think it's just from a infrastructure point of view, back in Tonga, back in Fiji, back in Samoa, that needs a little bit of a shake-up. And I stress that the key word is shake up, to be able to get real integrity in their structure and their processes, to choose the best, to get access to the best, and also just develop from the village, because there's a lot of talent there. They just they're not familiar with strength and conditioning. They're not familiar with the eating habits to make sure you get the best you peak at the right time. So a lot of that is education, but with a little bit more resources, I reckon those three nations will be powerhouses in no time, if not already.
And do you have a dream job in rugby, in any other space where rugby is involved? Do you have a dream job, or are you content with where you are right now?
I don't think that my job exists yet. Yeah, and I know I am really committed to rugby. Like there's been opportunities in other codes, but I really sense it. For me, it really is a calling for me. So I know that what I'm doing now is only for the time being, but until I get called to go elsewhere, I will remain here and serve faithfully here. I'm really fortunate that I've really great leadership at Rupa with Justin Harrison, and even just at the Melbourne Rebels and Baden Stevenson, where although I'm actually employed by Rupa, I've been able to do a lot for the club that that really suits my skill set, which I'm really encouraged that I'm able to contribute. And so, yeah, I definitely sense that I will be here serving in the Australian rugby ecosystem for a while. Australia will be home, I reckon, for a number of years yet. And so until God tells me otherwise, I know that my time is at Rupert and the Melbourne Rebels, but I really am sensing that, like you were saying, my dream job doesn't exist yet, but I know that I'm going to have a part in creating it. It's been bold, eh?
I love it. I love it. You just gotta, speak it into existence.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So when you're not, living, breathing rugby, blogging, thinking about writing, what do you do? I mean, obviously with the lockdown, pretty limited in terms of movement. What other, and I know you're a reader, and we'll get to that soon. What else do you like to do in your spare time, if you know?
Yeah, well, at the moment, it was something that I'm doing with some people from the club. We're doing this better challenge. We're raising money for kids' cancer at the moment. So it's actually an opportune time with lockdown. It's for the month of September. We're raising funds. I do regularly connect with people outside of Melbourne. So I have connected with some of the brothers in my space, but in Super Rugby Aotearoa. So I've connected with Arden from the Hurricanes and connected with Lloyd from the Chiefs. I really am around building my professional and personal business acumen. So I find that I'm forever learning by really connecting with people. I think there's real power in connection, even virtually. So I'm always looking at ways to better myself or to share best practice with others. I have aspirations with some friends of mine to be able to facilitate a farm that is specifically Pacific or specifically brown for female professionals in the game. So I will speak that to existence too. So
Yes.
it's just things like that in my head. There's just ideas of things that I would like to do to really. We as women, that we have such a unique dynamic that we can offer into all things. So, we talked before about, the church environment, but I think just in the marketplace, we provide a totally different perspective to our brothers that can really add value. And so I really want to maximize on that in my sector. While I'm here in Australia, I'm really wanting to glean and learn more about the First Nations here and with our Aboriginal people here in Australia. And for me, it really is just following people online, reading books, connecting with people back at home. Because I do miss home. I haven't seen my family and my friends since December 2019. So the hope is, Prime Minister Jacinda would lift the travel ban soon with no quarantine. But until then, I will no pushing off in Melbourne. So in doing so, I need to really maximize learning opportunities, ways that I can better myself, because if I better myself, those that I serve will also get a little bit of that. And reading has been a massive part of that. So learning new things, reading different kind of. I'm not usually a fiction reader. I read primarily nonfiction, but I joined an online book club while I was in Canberra. Stumbled across this Brown and Bookish book club online, and so that's been really great to expand my reading repertoire a bit. And especially because can't go to the movies, and I get a little bit sick of the screen time. So reading fiction actually has been quite different, but it's been good.
And so, what are some of these books? I know you shared one earlier. Do you have any other books there or any
Yeah.
recommendations that you can speak about?
So one that I've just finished reading, I gave it to my sister to read, but it's called Winning by Tim Grover. So he was the trainer for Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. So obviously sports is the theme. So that was a really, really good book for anyone that likes to, just the whole kind of mentality, the Mamba mentality that Kobe had, and even just Michael Jordan's work ethic, that you would have seen aspects of it in The Last Dance on Netflix. But the books I'm reading at the moment is Belonging, Owen Eastwood, Maori brother, who's currently based in England, I think. So I've just started reading it. It's something that our team, the Rebels rugby team, is really big on reading. So we kind of share books. Ego is the Enemy was the one that we read all together last year around holiday.
That's so cool, man, to hear that a rugby team is reading together, or that. I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we're really real big readers. The Resilience Project by, I can't pronounce his surname, but his name is Hugh. He's based here in Australia. That book was really good, and one that went kind of across the team. But yeah, now we're kind of all reading Owen Eastwood's Belonging. So it's a really cool, talks around some of the things that he's done, the whole whakapapa, and being able to immerse that in the rugby culture, in his case, sports culture. I think he's working with the Premier football team at the moment. But one of the Māori brothers from back in Aotearoa doing some grand work over in the UK, and just started this one, Clara and the Sun. This is our book club. This is our book club. So just started it. So Kazuo Ishiguro. Apologies if I've mispronounced that, but he is a Nobel Prize winner. So it's kind of cool to be able to read something that I wouldn't normally read. Which is fiction. But this one is one that we just finished reading and highly recommend it. I got some really cool nuggets out of it. The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Harris. If you've watched Get Out and kind of like Devil Wears Prada, it's kind of like a mix between that. So it's really, really, really interesting. And then I think the one that I kind of read in one sitting was Lani Went Young's newest book, Mataoti, which was awesome, about an apocalypse in Samoa.
I haven't read
really
that yet. I need to
yeah,
read
it's
that.
so good. Yeah. I was like, I never got into Walking Dead, but my friends got into Walking Dead. And I said, if you like Walking Dead, you'd love this book. It's very, who would have thought, like an apocalypse in Samoa?
Man, oh man, I'm just feeling really like, I'm not gonna kangi again, but
Aw,
just
so good.
like, honestly, sis, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you, just for some words of encouragement. And to be honest, you've just been dropping so many gems from start right up to this point, and I've a lot of what you've said has really resonated with me and hit me here, right here, deep, deep, deep down. I'm so appreciative. I'm so grateful that you were able to come through, and just share a bit of yourself, a bit of your story, what motivates you. Just you're so inspirational.
Oh,
um, and it's so great to hear that you're working in this job where you got to have a say in terms of all aspects of the job. I mean, that's wow, strong woman. I love it. That's very empowering. So, thank you for sharing that. Um, I'm just rambling here. I'm just feeling a bit. I'm
oh
not gonna cry
no,
here anymore.
no, that's
But
all good.
yeah, I just thank you so much for coming through. I'm just gonna hand it over to you to just drop some words of encouragement. Just for anyone who perhaps is wanting to get into your field of work, or just to is really just looking for some direction or some guidance at this point of their lives. Especially in these times of uncertainty and worry, with the pandemic and all. So I hand it over to you now.
Yeah, no, no. I guess first and foremost, thank you so much, Rosa, just for this opportunity. I mean, I don't take it lightly that you reached out. I'm always really mindful when it comes to platforms like this because, really want to make sure that it's genuine and authentic. And what you presented, even in some of the episodes that I've seen before, I was really encouraged that you're really walking it out in faith. And so, what was going to be all about books has ended up being about everyone's book of life. So it's really is for me really humbling to actually be a part of this particular journey. But if anything, I know Justin Sort always says be where your feet are, and it's really important that we need to really remain in the present, despite all of the chaos around us. Have a really really good circle of friends and that you share your heart with. And I think it's important, as I kind of alluded to before, around mental health and well-being, really looking after yourself, mind, body, and soul, especially in this time that we're living in, because there's a lot of information going around, whether it be about vaccines, whether it just be around life, and really making sure that you separate the I guess the weeds from the wheat, making sure that you make informed decisions, but also ensure that if you are in situations like you and I, we're not isolated, but we are away from family, to ensure that you have a really good circle around you, you have a good routine in place. Keep yourself and those of your loved ones in check, because you never know what the other person is going through. In terms of my journey, it is, as I mentioned before, was very non-linear. I didn't expect to be in this place, but I was very, very, I guess, my work ethic was my way of being able to get through the different roles that I had. And I think I was able to pick up a lot of soft skills and hard skills in the different jobs that I had that landed me into this place in the men's rugby space. And so if you are diligent with the small things, God will give you much more. And so I really, I stand on that. And I think that the only way is up. And I believe that full-heartedly. I'm really, really confident in what I bring to the table, but also mindful that it's not only just about me, that I need to hold space until such a time that I can open the doors for others, like my nieces and nephews, like my, the next generation to come busting through. So I'm really mindful that while I hold space, that I need to navigate that space well, really be being able to merge, our Pacifica values with the cultural Anglo-Saxon environments that we work in. There is a place where both can coexist, and so I'm a real. I believe that I navigate that well, where I'm able to still be cognizant of who I am as a Te Maita Samoa, but in the same token, who I am as a young professional in what is very much a man's world. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. Just need to make sure, like I said before, have some really good friends that you will tell you like it is. Maximize the opportunities that come your way. And if you need help, do not be afraid to put your hand up. And when you do the mahi, you get the treats, as they say. So I feel as if I'm still doing the mahi, and the treats are yet to come. So hopefully that really encourages someone. But if anything, it really is be present. But also in the same token, if you're able to take someone along the ride with you, then do that. I think that's really important, that we not forget that it's not just about us. As we both know, we may be the only one present in our respective spheres, but we've got a whole village behind us that no one sees. So just being mindful of that. So I think, that's probably just what I could encourage your listeners for today.
And you know what? Honestly, you've encouraged me so much. Just you have no idea just how encouraged I am from our Talanoa. And just wishing you all the best. Get through that lockdown, and all the best with your job there, and just keep inspiring. Keep walking in faith. So
Yeah, I will. And I am right back at you too. So, I mean, I know that you are carving out time, spending all this time sharing a bit of yourself with all of your listeners and those that you interview. But please know that you are doing meaningful and vital work there in Japan. And like I was saying before, the hearts and minds that you're shaping and molding. And I know that hasn't been easy with working with some of the people and maybe some of the structures that you're under. But be encouraged that you have some cheerleaders in the South Pacific cheering you on, Rosa, that you're not alone in this. So we got you. Yeah, we got you. And like you say, I'm really thankful that platforms, I know that social medias sometimes can be used incorrectly and therefore is negative, but I think social media and the way that we have reconnected has been amazing. And so, you're not bound by your postcode, because you've now got a different postcode in Japan. But it's really great, as I mentioned before, the mantle of leadership that you have on you, what you've been able to really do with this podcast, and you've enlightened me with some of the speakers that you've had on that I never would have known about. So your reach is far and wide, and so to know that this virtual mission field that you've got is amazing. So keep on doing your grand work, both in the education sector, but also in the virtual space too. So thank you.